Hello and welcome to the Siebel 20 workshop. My name is Alexander Hansal and I'm happy that you can join me for this presentation on a summary of updates and new features provided by Oracle between versions 18.7 and 20.9. So we start with 18.7, delivered in July 2018, and the highlights of this update were the gateway cluster, the general availability of that, D3.js used for rendering of chart applets, a new theme called Sky Blue, and the availability of configuration pages to configure enterprises and servers in the Siebel Management Console. The gateway cluster was available officially with 18.7, and this is a feature that relies on the zookeeper clustering and allows customers to eliminate the single point of failure that was introduced with the new Siebel architecture in 17.0. So up to this point, you could have only one gateway, and if the gateway failed, no connections and sessions were possible. So now with the cluster service, especially in critical and production environments, customers can rely on the zookeeper cluster and create clusters and deploy them through the SMC. On the JavaScript side of 18.7, Oracle provided the library called D3, or Data-Driven Documents, is one of the most versatile JavaScript libraries and very well known in the industry as being one of the best data visualization libraries. This open source library is now included with Siebel versions 18.7 and higher, and is used out of the box for browser-side rendering of the chart applets and allows better control for customization. A new theme was delivered with 18.7. Based on Synergy, the Sky Blue theme is similar in appearance to the previously delivered Synergy and vanilla themes, and features big icons for screen applets and optimization. And finally, in 18.7, the server configuration pages were included in the Siebel Management Console. So they provide an alternative to the Server Manager command line or the Siebel Web Client views, which still do exist and can be used for the same purpose, but allows to administrators to go through a lightweight interface and provides a collection and a subset of similar tasks as is provided in the administration server configuration screen. In Siebel CRM Update 18.8, Asynchronous Migration was introduced. Asynchronous Migration allows administrators to detach a migration export from migration import. So in versions prior to 18.8, there was only synchronous migration, requiring that both the target and the destination environment are live and reachable from both machines, which posed problems at customers regarding firewalls, etc. So with 18.8 and higher, you can define migration plans as export only by just using a source connection, and import only by just using a destination connection. The output is packaged as a zip file in the so-called migration package location, which is a share or a folder that you can specify. In Siebel CRM Update 18.12 in December 2018, the SMC got a new page for server management. So the server management page, similar to the configuration page that was released earlier, is an alternative to the Server Manager command line or Siebel Web Client views, both of which are still valid alternatives and still exist. And it allows administrator to perform similar tasks as in the user face of the administration server management screen. In March 2019, Oracle delivered the update 19.3, and this included the following highlights: LOV modification in runtime repository environments, EIM import for LOVs, and workspace-aware REST and SOAP requests. So the direct editing of LOVs in runtime repository or test and production environments was not available before 19.3. So in 19.3 or higher, administrators can now edit LOVs directly in the list of values view, same as before IP17. And there is a new system preference called seed migration priority, which defines if either the development environment, the DR, or the runtime environment wins in case changes for LOVs are migrated, for example, using the migration application. Also, related to LOVs, Enterprise Integration Manager now supports, again, the LOV bulk import in 19.3 or higher. To achieve that, you have to run a separate utility called LOV_EIM, as indicated in the update guide. And once this utility has run on both environments and has been deployed, then you can use the EIM table for list of values, but you must use the Oracle provided IFB file for LOVs. The July update for 2019, 19.7, brought the highlights as follows: multi-tab browsing and inline attachment editing security through an application user property. So as of 19.7 and higher, administrators can specify parameters in the AI profile and on the server component, which then allow users to open multiple application sessions in multiple tabs on the same browser. And downloading or inline editing attachments has been secured through the because of a security risk that was exposed. And so there is a new application user property which must be set in the application either to a value of all or to a semicolon separated list of file extensions such as PDF, docx, or etc. And this application user property called file download save, once it's present and set correctly, allows inline editing of attachments. If this property is not set, the inline editing feature of attachments is not available. In November 2019, the update 19.11 included the SMC Safe Mode feature. SMC Safe Mode means that administrators can specify a Safe Mode user on the settings page of the Siebel Management Console, which then allows to log in so-called Safe Mode and change the security profile, which, for example, is necessary if you want to modify or switch to another authentication service such as LDAP after using database authentication, or when the database hostname information changes. The first featured update in 2020 was 20.3, and it included several highlights, such as the seamless repository delivery framework, including the post-install database setup utility, introducing the hybrid runtime repository version rollback, auto-tile visualization, new parameters for the migration application, and the ability to modify LOVs in integration workspaces in development environments. The Seamless Repository Delivery Framework, delivered in 20.3 and higher, is a new method of updating the Siebel repository, so delivering new functionality without requiring a complex repository merge. This feature is driven mainly by the so-called post-install database setup utility, which can be run separately by command line, but is included in the SES update installer. This utility reads the master UCF files from previous database installations or upgrades and populates the parameters. You can opt to change the parameters as an administrator, and upon successful run generates an HTML report which can be used to review the changes delivered in that particular update. The update installer as of 20.3 and higher also features the inclusion of non-extensible object or NEO files, which are laid down as part of the binary update. The post-install database setup utility, as mentioned previously, is a separate utility but included in the SES update installer. It is an orchestration facility for several scripts and utilities that update the Siebel database in terms of schema, manifest information, and seed data and repository. It also runs several other utilities that were previously needed to be run manually, such as WS ranking. It generates an HTML report, which can prove very useful for analyzing what changes have been introduced, and is restartable. The non-extensible object files contain runtime repository information, but unlike the traditional runtime repository loaded from the database tables, they are loaded as files into memory. And if you use About View, you will, from 23 onwards, you will see the red NEO sign in square brackets if an object comes from a non-extensible object file. Also in 20.3, Oracle made the Runtime Repository version rollback publicly available. This is for runtime repository environments, so test and production, and allows administrators through the workspace dashboard to roll back to prior stable versions of the main workspace or activate the current version. Another feature introduced in 20.3 is the auto tile visualization. So this previously was only available through customization of individual applet and is now available as by setting a user property on either the application level for all list applet or for individual applets. The user property is called enable auto tile. The default visualization is a tile for each individual record with 9 fields, which are the first 9 columns in the applet web template. By setting the web template item placeholder numbers in another user property, configurators can control which fields are displayed in the tile. The migration application has been enhanced in 20.3 and higher in as the connection information now allows to store the database table owner username, table space names, and database encoding, information which previously had to be entered manually when executing migration plans. This is for target environments only which receive database changes through the database schema service. The modification of LOVs has been further enhanced in development environments. As of 20.3 and higher, you can open an integration workspace, including main, and modify LOVs directly. In 22 or lower, you would have to create a development workspace and deliver that. There is a new system preference which you can use to control this feature. In May 2020, the Siebel CRM update 20.5 included the early adopter version of the modular deployment engine. Note that the early adopter feature is only available to customers in the early adopter program. Customers in the early adopter program can benefit from the Siebel Modular Deployment Engine already, and this Modular Deployment Engine, or MDE, is a single installer for all Siebel components. So prior to this feature, SES tools and client have separate installers. So this is now a single installer, and it also does away with the need to install a base 17.0 and then apply the update. So this is not just a single installer for components, but it also includes all binaries, etc. needed for the current version. And it also includes the post-install database update utility that was introduced in 20.3. In June 2020, in the 20.6 update, Oracle enhanced the REST API for multi-object support. So now it is possible to insert or update an array of primary records for the primary BC up to a maximum of 100 records in one request. Following this was the July release of 20.7, which introduced a very important change in the workflow process architecture, now allowing parallel development and deployment for workflow processes. 20.7 was a controlled release. So any release higher than 20.7 or 20.7 itself introduces parallel workflow deployment. So it makes the old runtime tables architecture of workflows, where workflows have to be activated and are subsequently copied to runtime tables, obsolete. So also the activation of workflow processes itself is an obsolete task as of now. The only way to activate a workflow is through the workflow process definition in the design repository. And any active workflow that is active in the design repository will be compiled to the runtime repository table, which is used from this release on. And so the application reads the workflow definition directly from the runtime repository table, which is fully integrated with the workspaces. So it allows developers to work in parallel on workflow process definitions and test different versions independent of each other. The post-install database setup utility takes care of migrating existing workflow processes prior to 20.7 to the new model when you apply update 20.7 or higher. In August 2020, the 20.8 update introduced the replacement for Oracle Database XE with SE2 for the local database for Siebel mobile web clients. It also introduced some enhancements to the Outbound REST API and introduced a re-architecture of browser scripts, now allowing parallel development and deployment for browser scripts. Oracle XE is no longer a supported database for the Siebel local database for the mobile web client. Customers using SQL Anywhere or Oracle XE in prior versions such as Siebel 15 or Siebel 16 are encouraged to upgrade to 20.8 or higher to stay in support for the new database, which is now Oracle SE2 Standard Edition 2. The migration of databases is facilitated by the update installer, which lays down the SE2 database on the machine where the update is installed. The Outbound REST API has received some significant enhancements in 20.8 as it is now fully compatible with OpenAPI 2.0, and The import is still through Siebel tools, but is now facilitated by the config agent Tomcat, the CA Tomcat residing on the SES application container. And these API, OpenAPI 2.0 compatible JSON files are imported through the combination of Siebel tools and the config agent Tomcat and produce the proxy business service and proxy integration objects. Also in 20.8, browser scripts have been re-architected, and the big message here is that the generate browser script utility GenB script is no longer necessary. It's no longer necessary to extract browser scripts from the runtime repository and put them on the AI folders. Instead, browser scripts are now retrieved from the runtime repository table of the parent object, such as srr applet, and the script is returned to the browser in real time, and the browser caches the script and executes it. So this also allows developers to work in parallel and test in parallel on browser scripts, keeping in mind that Oracle heavily discourages to use browser scripts if you are using OpenUI. In September 2020, Oracle delivered the following highlights: smartphone UX and automation enhancements for test automation. Smartphone UX is available for Siebel mobile applications in 20.9 and allows for an automated optimizations of views and applets for phone-sized devices. It uses the tile visualization introduced in 20.3 by default, so rendering list applet records automatically as a scrollable vertical tile list, and it introduces a new context renderer class for OpenUI, which is used by the smartphone UX framework to improve the visual layout of views and applets on the small screen. In addition, there is a new theme exclusively as of 20.9 for smartphone UX, but Oracle has announced to extend the Redwood theme also to desktop applications. The test automation feature introduced with 17.0 got the first big update in 20.9, including the automation execution configuration being renamed and enhanced. Now it's called test execution, and a REST API being introduced to create, read, update, and delete test execution records, to schedule test executions, rerun test executions, and create test passes. The other important feature in test automation is datasets, now allowing for data-driven testing and iteration through defined datasets, which can be defined in the Siebel database or imported from CSV files. As a preview into the future at the time of this recording, Oracle has announced the public availability for the script editor and debugger for server scripts in Siebel Web Tools for 20.11 tentatively. This is available as a controlled release since 19.8 and introduces a browser-side script editor for server scripts, which is fully integrated in Siebel Web Tools and includes a debugging facility.